What's going on, guys? This is Miasin, and today's video is all about playing better, avoiding misplays by putting your cards in the right column, not just monsters but also spells and traps. So another bum-ass article from Akira again. At this point you already know it. So huge shoutouts to Road of the King, and also before this video starts, make sure you like and subscribe. Check me out on Instagram and Twitch. Both links will always be in the description box below, since the introduction of Link Monsters columns have become way more important than ever, and also because of the fact that there are link arrows that also point down or sometimes up, so it changes a lot. And also we had the Mecha Knight archetype, which also made the columns more important, but there are more cards. It's not just Relinquished Anima and Mecha Knight. So the first one is one of the most obvious ones and one of the most typical misplays that people do, is putting monsters that can be targeted in column 2 or 4. You try to avoid doing that because Relinquished Anima has a kind of marker zone that points up, and of course it is only summonable in the extra monster zone, or, well, technically if you have link arrows down you can summon it in the main monster zone, but then it will never point to a monster your opponent controls. It could be in the same column, but that's not really what Relinquished Anima reads. It really has to point directly to it. So unless it's in the extra monster zone in column 2 or 4, it will not be able to absorb anything. Therefore, if you want your monster to not be absorbable by Relinquished Anima, summon your monsters in 1, 3, or 5. Now, the funny thing is, even 1, 3, and 5 are kind of dangerous, so I'm going to be covering that really soon. Well, actually, right now. So, with the Orcus deck, column 2, 3, 4, and 5 are dangerous because Longirsu points directly in front of it, and also diagonally to the left, if I recall correctly. So, because of that, if it's in the leftmost extra monster zone against you, your monsters in 2 and 4 obviously are always in danger regardless, but also even monsters in 3, and then if it's in the rightmost extra monster zone, the monsters in column number 5 are in danger. And what Longirsu does is that monsters that are linked to Longirsu, so not necessarily co-linked, just linked, which means that either it points to or is appointed by Longirsu, can be sent to the graveyard by Longirsu's effect without even targeting, which is very, very dangerous. And if your opponent already used the effect of Dingirsu to send something else, or couldn't go into Dingirsu, then Longirsu is probably a really good way of doing that. But the good news, I guess I want to say, is that Longirsu is not really prominent. Not only do you have to face against Orcus, but also you have to face against an Orcus player who is trying to summon actively Longirsu, because I think most Orcus decks actually cut this card completely. It's a Link 3, Galatea is better, so this should not happen as often, of course, as Relinquished Anima absorbing your monsters. Now, another really important thing that isn't being covered here is that there is another monster called Geonator Transversor. It literally does almost the same as Longirsu does. It's basically a creature swap-esque effect. So one monster that is being pointed by with the Geonator Transversor on your field will swap control with a monster that is being pointed by Geonator Transversor in the opponent's field, which means that if your monster is in column 1 and your opponent's monster is in column 3, and your Geonator Transversor here, you can do a creature swap, transfer this monster to this one, and if your Geonator Transversor is here, you can swap your middle monster with your opponent's monster that is here. So in other words, your opponent's monster that is here is always safer. You would realize that column number 5 is the only column that is safe from Geonator Transversor when you are playing. In theory, column 2 and 4, but we already established that these columns are very dangerous because of Anima. So in other words, if you're trying to cover as much ground as possible, you have to consider that column 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the most dangerous ones. And if you really want one monster to not really be outed by stupid things like easy to make generic Link monsters almost, I would recommend column number 5 the most. So let's just say that you're playing Thunder Dragon and your main win condition is Thunder Dragon Colossus. You only have one Thunder Dragon Colossus. You try to summon it in column number 5. After that, all the monsters that you summon, you can summon them in 1 and 3, and then you can start summoning them in 2 and 4. It's always in that order. It really, really is important. Trust me. Relinquished Anima actually changes everything when you play out the game, and if Geonator Transversor gains in popularity, I know people used to play it in Drytron because it could actually clear Dragoon if your opponent misplayed. Alright, of course, this is the most popular one, Mecha Knights. Knights. Now, the Mecha Knight deck is the reason why people have PTSD from putting a lot of cards in the same column. Typically, you never want to have more than one card in the same column, but sometimes it's just too much to ask, so sometimes you're bound to have like 2 cards in the same column. Please, for the love of God, never put 3 cards in the same column, because not only will Blue Sky search 3 cards, it searches 1 Mecha Knight monster for every card in your opponent's column, but on top of that, you're also losing to another card called Iron Dragon Tiamaton, which can be summoned when there are 3 or more cards in one column, and then you can special summon it to another column and destroy every card in that column except itself, as long as it's on the field. And neither player can special summon, I think, from the extra monster zone in that column of Iron Dragon Tiamaton. So yeah, very dangerous. I want to say this is probably the worst setup that you can do. I actually have seen a lot of pro players unfortunately mess up really hard with, let's say, Sky Striker, where they had this identical setup and then their opponents would go like special summon Blue Sky effect and you lose. So yeah. Alright, so this article also covers infinite impermanence, but I'm going to add something else. There is infinite impermanence for spells and traps, but there's also another card called Broken Line. So if you activate spells, traps, or even monster effects in the same column as Broken Line just negates it completely. It's an omni-negate counter trap, so you can't really respond to it unless you have your own counter trap. And Imperm is a 2-in-1 package deal. Not only is it a Veiler when it is used from the hand, but when it is used on the field, it is also a Veiler that negates spells and traps and monster effect. Well, no, actually only spells and traps that are being activated in the same column. Yeah, very, very dangerous to place cards in the same column as Imperm. So when you are going second, make sure that every time you use your spells and your trap cards, whatever, they are always in different columns than your opponent. Unless you have your own Imperm, then you can Imperm your opponent's monster and negate their spells and traps, which means that you actually get to benefit the most as possible from Imperm. This is actually a way you can literally clear annoying floodgates, like there can only be one even when you're not meaning back row removal. Now, this is not really about punishing, but rather just doing the correct things. When you have cards like Kagari, Shizuku, typically you want to put them where they only point to like the leftmost or rightmost column. So for example, Kagari points like there and Shizuku points here. So if your opponent has like Phoenix or whatever, you're not really allowing him to like extend it to even more things. So Frigid points to the, I think, left diagonally. So if you put your Shizuku here, the Frigid will not give your opponent's Tri-Brigade deck more columns. Pretty much the same thing with Beer Bloom as well. So if you put like your monster, whatever, the other way around, he just won't have any columns from the Link monster. So he will only have the extra monster zone, which means that he can extend with less links. Alright, so this doesn't really have any relevance with your opponent's misplaying or whatever, but rather you doing the correct thing. So let's just say that you have a Link monster like Beer Bloom or Frigid, and it points down diagonally either to the left or to the right. Typically, you want to have it point to the middle, because regardless of the monster that you summon, if it points either left or right, at least you can keep extending. So for example, here you have a Beer Bloom here and a Frigid here, meaning that the middle zone is always free. And if you summon your Frigid incorrectly, so here instead of here, the Beer Bloom only gets to point to one column, which doesn't exist because this is the leftmost. So if you have another Tri-Brigade that can use its effect, well, unfortunately, you locked yourself out. You no longer have anything to play into. Try to always start by playing with the middle columns and then expand rather to the left and to the right at the same time, instead of trying to lock yourself to one specific part of the board. So in conclusion, there are some typical considerations to make when placing your cards on the field, and they should be added on as a second layer of planning over your main line of play. I totally agree. This should be second nature to you, honestly. You should be able to always place your cards always at the perfect column, so that you can not only just focus on breaking your opponent's board, but also not losing to blowouts that you really shouldn't be losing to, such as Imperm, negating your spell and trap, Relinquish Tanima, absorbing your monster, etc. So certain plays and combos have inflexible placement, unfortunately, such as Pendulums, because the Pendulum scales always have to be on column 1 and 5. So if you know for a fact that you're playing against Pendulum, your Imperm should always be in column 1 and 5, because you can negate, let's say, like a Skullcrobat Joker and either an Ove Dragon or a magical called Doctor or Servant of the Endymion in the scale, and that's a really fantastic 2-in-1 package deal. And also Link monsters always have to be in column 2 or 4, which makes it so they always lose to Mega Fleet, and they always lose to Broken Line as well, and also Iron Dragon Tiamaton. But whenever you can though, just try to make sure that you always place your cards in the right columns to minimize the odds of losing to just dumb things that you definitely have control over, because remember that when you are losing to these kind of cards, you had the cards to win, you lost to just incorrect judgment calls by not considering everything that should become second nature to you. I really hope that this video and the article helped out a lot. Again, gigantic shoutouts to Akira and Road of the King, fantastic articles. I have nothing bad to say about them, just always providing sick ass things. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys actually think of all this in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.